Tonight we're going to be looking at some wisdom as found in Ecclesiastes, and then we're going to end on one and consider it in a way. By way of curiosity, Ecclesiastes 9:4. Ecclesiastes has some curious verses in there. This is one of the ones that's very curious. It's all of its wisdom, but this is not really specifically wisdom. It says, "For to him that is joined to all the living there is hope. For a living dog is better than a dead lion." You see that?
That's funny.
It is. Isn't that kind of a weird verse? It is. It's almost colorful. You know, you have the black and white, and then all of a sudden there's that little thing that's not the same.
It does that a lot in some places. If you throws in something, and you say,
And I think what does this one suggest? What does this? I mean, it's in full color. What does it suggest? A living dog is better than a dead lion.
Whatever has a future, one doesn't.
Yeah. Actually, it's in the verse too. It's related to what you said, Samuel.
It makes me
What
think
verse is
of
it?
battle.
9:4. Sorry?
It makes me think of battle. Like, lions are fierce and deadly. Dogs are fierce also, but obviously on a much smaller scale.
Uh-huh.
So, who is the dog or the lion? Like, based on, because I'm guessing you've read all up to this point.
Yeah. It's really not it's kind of like a Proverbs. Like the Proverbs, this is kind of like its own little chunk of chapter of information, and then the next verse is another chunk. I mean, so there's really not a connection to something earlier in the thing that I see.
if you go back to the first part of it, it's he who's joined to the living, there's hope. There's always hope if you're alive. But
Yes.
it's not if you're dead.
That's right. Doesn't matter how big and bad you are. After you're dead, you are going to have an effect on nobody, you know, and you're not going to have an effect on yourself actually. And so the living dog has more hope than a dead lion. No matter how you slice it, no matter what you're talking about. Go ahead.
It also makes me think about the two, like Lion of Judah, David, and then the woman who
Jezebel.
Jesus was like,
Oh, no.
you don't, like, I'm not here for the dogs, and she's like, but even the dogs beg for crumbs at the end of the master's table
Right.
or whatever. So,
Huh.
you don't necessarily have to be a Lion of Judah as long as you're still coming to the table.
Interesting. Note there. Huh. Wow. I don't want to jump to that, but what you suggested that the lion could just be a suggestion of something that is now dead, but the dog is alive.
Yeah, like,
That would be like Jews are no longer the chosen entity of God's involvement. Now it's the dogs of the Gentiles. Maybe I'm not saying this is, but I'm saying, wow, if this was, it would be a prophetic notion of the future. Interesting. Good point. So anyway, I thought that was a real colorful verse in the midst of that. But let's look at chapter 9 verse 10 and see what that says. "Whatsoever thy hand findeth, do it with thy might. For there is no work, nor device, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in hell, whither thou goest." What do you think that verse is talking about?
if God puts a task before you, do it with everything that you have, because once you're dead, you don't have a chance to do it anymore.
Yes. Our opportunity to use our lives as an investment in the future is now. Our opportunity to show God we love Him is now. Our opportunity to accomplish things is now. This also suggests that after now, there will be nothing to do, nothing to affect, nothing to change, nothing to accomplish. Because that time is now. Well, and we will. We are going to experience a stint of time in heaven. Heaven number one. And back then it was Sheol. Back then it was peace. If Solomon died, how many of y'all think Solomon was saved? Yeah, I do too.
I think he let the world get to him before he was done, but I'm believing it.
I do too, and y'all waited real long. It's like, wow, it's good to think through that, because we have a lot on Solomon that might say, well, I think Solomon was saved. But not that he didn't have a bunch of squirrels in his cage. David had a lot too, but of course David surely was, less debatable than Solomon would be, if we're going to say that. I don't think David's debatable at all, unless you just look at his sins. But anyway, if indeed Solomon was saved, and I believe he was, and David, he's going to be on Peace Street side of Sheol. And that's the place where the soul and spirit are. But the Old Testament wasn't heaven; it was actually in the Hades realm. Now it's going to be in the heaven realm. To be absent from the bodies, be present with the Lord. I think it's the same going on there right now. When we get done here and we find ourselves up there, there'll be nothing else to accomplish. No ability to invest our lives in for the future. No opportunity to show God we love Him, because right now we show we love Him back in our obedience. Which obedience, that lets me go on to say that obedience is an act of our will. In other words, there's something inside us, if left alone, we wouldn't obey God. Our natural man would say, no, I'd rather not do that. And we would do what we want instead of what God wants. When we choose to obey, we are choosing not to disobey. It's a conscious act that we do. When we get to heaven, there will be no conscious act of obedience. It will just be, of course, obedience. That opportunity to choose is only here. That opportunity to say, I will say no to my flesh, is here. That opportunity ends at the grave. That's what this is suggesting. This is more non-spiritual, but you get a lot of that in the Proverbs and the Ecclesiastes. The lack of holy work. And when you get to the New Testament, we're all given a holy assignment. In the Old Testament, it doesn't seem to be that way. And but that's kind of like the difference, and yet it's kind of... You understand where I'm going with this? You understand, Steve, where I'm going with this, kind of? Yeah. The opportunity we have to invest our lives will be here. There'll be nothing to accomplish before the Bema. If we were to die all right now, God were to take us up in a whirlwind and leave our bodies here somewhere for the worms to eat, or maybe just take us all up. That would be cool. Anyway, we would be up there. There'd be nothing left to do until the Bema. Nothing.
How long is there between?
Now in the Bema? Well, until now in the rapture. The Bema starts at the rapture. So if we die right now, and say there's like 15 years till, the final play of what we see in Revelation, we have 10 years, we'll be up there like, okay.
I don't think we'll be bored.
Yeah, I think we'll think different. But this says the time to accomplish is now. The time to do is now. The time to be productive is now. Because once you're dead, it's too late. And that's what this suggests. And the opportunity God gives us, that's the time to get involved with what God wants for us to do. So anyway, that's what I see in this particular verse. It kind of gave me and it says no wisdom in Sheol, whither thou goes. I'm not sure the fullness of that. I think we will know as we know. Maybe wisdom there is an accumulative thing suggested here. Whereas in Sheol, it is what it is. There really isn't any more to be had. It's a final place of state. And so, anyway, that's what I see in there. Let's move on to 9, 14 through 18. there was a little city, and this is kind of like a little story in the midst of it. This is where this is kind of unique. There was a little story, a few men within it. There came a great king against it and besieged it and built great bulwarks against it. Now there was found in it a poor wise man, and he by his wisdom delivered the city. Yet no man remembered that same poor man. Then said I, wisdom is better than strength. Nevertheless, the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heard. Interesting. What does that say about wisdom? Despised. I have a... How many of you know, generally speaking, what your spiritual gifts are? Stephen? Yeah. Miss Sandy, do you know what your spiritual gifts are?
I'm sorry.
Do you know what your spiritual gifts are?
Couple of them, I don't know.
What was... I know the Pentecostals say that the first... And I'm not talking about every Pentecostal, but some of the mainline Pentecostal churches say that the first spiritual gift that you have in demonstration is speaking tongues, and then from there you grow into different gifts. No, it's not always gifting tongues, and they get that from Acts primarily. And there are some places in Acts where it says, the apostles laid hands on, they began to immediately speak of tongues. So it does say that there. Although be careful about Acts building doctrinal bulwarks from. But I was looking at my spiritual gifts. I know one was there from the start, and it was my prophetic gift, because it fleshed out in evangelistic ways. But that's what the denomination did back then. The denomination did back then. If you were active for God, you took a tract and you gave it to them. That's what you did. And so it looked evangelistic, but it was really prophet, because the consistent thing in me was I was a Bible thumper Jesus freak. And not Bible thumper so much because I didn't understand the Bible for my first 8 years, but I was active about getting out there and making Jesus and doing it loud and proud. And so my first gift that I realized I had, that now I realize I had looking back, was my gift, my prophet gift. The second one, as I look back, was my wisdom gift. And that's after that first wilderness experience I told you about, that I went for 8 years, didn't understand anything, I was reading the Bible. And I was like, God, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all men liberally and upbraids on. It says, Lord, I need that. And then at 16 years old, the light bulb came on. That was that wisdom gift. And I have this, not like Solomon, but it's like, I recognize what that is, and recognize through the years, even not recognizing I had that gift, God was giving me wisdom. And later on, he showed me the difference. So in that, I've seen the different stages of wisdom for me. So for me, this is kind of like, it's kind of like coming to a woodworker, a cabinet builder, and you tell him, okay, you got to drop the cabinets, and then you got to learn to do the cutout list, and then you got to know what to put together when and what order, and then you got to sand this down. It's a developmental idea of how to build proficiently cabinets, okay? This is something the Lord, I think, has given me with regard to wisdom. First of all, wisdom educates. And it never doesn't educate. But that's the first thing you kind of realize. And it's kind of a wonderful thing. It's like, wow, I'm learning stuff. And that never stops. But as you grow in wisdom, it separates. It's because as you're getting this wisdom, you're not agreeing with everybody around you. You're kind of being separated off to knowing some other things that maybe some other people don't, and maybe some other people never will. And depending on how receptive they are of it, if they're really receptive, they can grow along in a little bit, but not like you are, that you have it. But it separates you from the crowd. And it doesn't always not, it always educates. And from the separation, the more wisdom you get, it will isolate you. It will cause others to question whether or not you're doing what you ought to be doing, when the whole while was a grooming of God to be precisely where you are. The fact is, you couldn't be where God wants you to be unless you are isolated. We know that to be true around the world around us, right? How can we grow as we ought to in Christ, not separated from the world, not isolated from the world? We can't be. But even further stated, God will isolate you from the rest of religion, if you will, or Christianity. And God, in this, all I'm saying is, the wisdom that comes from this, you can't get it if you stop here. You know why? Because you will stop here. It will educate. In fact, here's something else I'm learning on this. If you're at this level of wisdom, the group of people will be large. As you grow in wisdom, this group of people will get smaller. Now, this will be the group of people, and all the wisdom that can be had with that group of people, you will be getting. And that the people will be getting with you. But it will stop there. And that's okay. But if God has got you on a path of wisdom, and He wants to give you more, which is an incredible privilege, it'll be this category, and it'll almost be this. Because if it includes this, this will hinder you from full growth. And this will also affect you in further growth. When you remove this, the only thing now that's affecting you is God. Revelation. I would not, and that was from the dust yesterday, by the way. My goodness. Last night I was fine. This morning I got up and I went to the sauna this afternoon after work, and all my nasal passages cleared up. I was like, oh, this is good. I fixed it. Oh, no, it's still coming back. Yeah, thank you. I think I will. Revelation. If I was a mainstay Baptist regarding my Revelation and got their materials and read their materials, I wouldn't have Revelation like I understand it today. I probably still pre-mill, pre-trib until someone else up the line or in the line wrote a different. If I would have read other people's books that maybe weren't Southern Baptists, just people who have an understanding of Revelation, I wouldn't be as confident as what I got from God was precisely from Him. But the revelation that I have today on Revelation, the certainty that I have on it, it's actually confirmed because of this. I didn't read anything but the Scriptures. And then God gave me revelation. There's some wisdom you can't get unless you are isolated. Or you'll be stuck. I stay stuck. This is not a bad place to be. This is not a bad... Get wisdom! But if you're going to continue to grow in wisdom, it will separate you. And then it will isolate you. And then it's painful to get more. Tells us that in chapter 1. Go ahead.
Do you think that Solomon stopped in one of those categories? Because if he had truly gotten isolated, do you think he would have fallen so far off path?
What tree were they not supposed to eat in the Garden of Eden? Tree of the knowledge of good and evil. I think Solomon was eating on it. He was getting way more than what God ever intended. And I think that's why the overtone of Ecclesiastes is like it is. He had a lust for wisdom, not just a desire. So he started eating all these things. And see, one of the things I can know on that, and that's one of the things we're going to get to in this, I think, sin is an ever-increasing desire for an ever-diminishing pleasure. That's where Solomon was at with wisdom. Ever-increasing desire for an ever-diminishing pleasure. He wanted something new, wanted something new, wanted something new, wanted something new, because the old wasn't strung in that same chord like it used to. Because like I said, man, everything's been done under the sun already. That was an expression of disappointment, of depression. Nothing new. So he tried something new. He tried to be a fool. He tried to be a drunkard. He tried this. We know what he's like. He tried a lot of different wives. Not happy. Ever-increasing desire for an ever-diminishing pleasure is one of the definitions of sin. Solomon called it pursuit of wisdom. He went too far. And I think that's why we see Ecclesiastes has such a dark tone to it. It's because he was experiencing wisdom in all these other ways. And God, instead of just getting it God's way, he was getting it his way. And he called it vanity of vanities. All is vanity. That's not the wisdom we should want. That's not the wisdom we should be pursuing like a passion. But anyway, yeah. I think he went through all these, and then he kept on. If we're going to say this is getting better and better and better, Solomon kept doing it where now it was getting worse and worse and worse and worse. So better, 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 better. It's just part of the wisdom that comes from God. And then after that, it just gets worse and worse and worse. So, yeah. I don't know if that really... It's kind of like doing a full circle, but getting to the dark side. It's kind of like if this half is light and this half is dark, he was on the dark side. So, but it's painful. It tells us that in chapter 1. Some things you can't know until you experience pain with them. You can't. It tells us in chapter 1. Here, wisdom is called despised. What can we glean from this verse, or these couple of verses that talk about the wisdom being despised? Look at your Bibles.
Do you think it's because he did it in a humble way?
Why do you say humble?
Well, it says, now there was found in it a poor wise man.
Ooh!
By his wisdom delivered the city, yet no one remembered that same poor man. So he saved everyone, but he wasn't all, I'm the hero, look at me. So it was humble.
Let's use the word. It's in there. You read it twice. Poor.
Poor.
Poor!
Isn't there a lot of contradiction for what you're saying in Proverbs?
Why?
With wisdom comes like riches in her left hand and long life in her right, and stuff like that. And about walk through the counselor, there's safety as far as the isolation. Or maybe that's just
No, these are good thoughts. And then some of these I haven't really thought through yet. By the way, this is one of the reasons why there's such value coming together, because it causes us a greater mental exercise.
Depends on the measure with which each person is in.
or maybe you have to define what riches and poor are.
Well, and
There's
we...
also stuff in there that says, a rich person has many friends, but everybody hates a poor person, pretty much.
Yeah, this poor man, I think, is not talking about poor regarding his soul, certainly not his spirit. The Bible says the poor are often rich in faith. That means their spirit is alive and well and of great value. Yes. So we see that with regard to that. And a poor man who is rich in faith, guess what his soul often is? Pretty healthy as well, regardless of the state of his living conditions. And so, yeah, it's a good thought to pursue in that. So those are some good things to contemplate. Let's go on from here, because I don't have a good answer for those, because I haven't actually thought through it. That's a good point. But this associate the wisdom that delivered this city was from this poor man. That, and it gives it in contrast to another person, right? What's that?
The great king? Is that what you're...
Yeah, I'm looking here. It says, the great king was against it. Oh, 17. I knew it was there. The words of the wise men are heard in quiet, more than the cry of him that ruleth among fools. So it seems like in a very, again, this is like story form instead of a proverb. It talks about the wisdom of the poor, and the other person down there is the fools. I think this is the contrast right here. Contrast, not comparison. The opposite of poor would be the fool. So, let me ask you this. Does this suggest that wisdom comes via a poor avenue, whereas wisdom doesn't come by a rich man's avenue? Can a rich man be wise?
I think wisdom comes from experience. And a poor person might go through more experiences than a rich person does.
Well, we would have to define, I know what you're saying, but just experiences, just to say experience at large, a rich man has more opportunity to experiences than a poor man would. Like, for instance, the experience of going on vacation, experience of jumping out of a plane, experience of doing bungee jumping, experience of going to the car races. That's an experience as well. But I'm not sure it's wisdom generating. See what I'm saying? The poor man, I think what you're suggesting, has an experience of life, perhaps by faith, that comes with wisdom at least, that a rich man can't know. How can a rich man know how to live by faith financially? He can't.
Yeah, it's harder because he can go buy what he wants, you know?
How can a rich man understand what a poor man goes through? They can't. They can't. So in that way, there's that lack of wisdom via that avenue. I think that might have been what we were suggesting, but just because a person is rich doesn't mean he doesn't have an experience of life. He just has a lot of experiences in life, but I don't think it produces the wisdom that we're talking about here. But it's interesting how that wisdom here is associated with the poor man, and I want to suggest maybe, because it does say this, that a rich man, though it's not impossible, but for him, wisdom, I'm not talking about knowledge, I'm not talking about intellect, that is not what wisdom is. But a rich man may have difficulties with securing wisdom. I think he can, but I think it's hard because he has so much that he can depend on other than, well, what a poor man. It's despised. What do you think about this wisdom being despised? Why was it despised?
Why the poor man was despised, is that what you said?
Let's see what it says here. It says, the poor man's wisdom is despised. So now, it's by this poor man's condition of life that God created for him. But that kind of wisdom is despised. Why?
Because it comes with an amount of, like, shame or jealousy.
Okay.
That I wasn't able to put that, or have that wisdom, or...
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Could be.
Well, I think they too might think that, you know, if you were wise, why are you so poor? Why haven't you had wisdom to gain more profit or to get more stuff, you know, or...
And the other side of that is these people might be... That's exactly right, Miss Sandy. And another point on top of that is that if indeed this is where this kind of wisdom comes from, I don't want to go down that path. For instance, let's use this. If I've suggested these graduations of wisdom properly, this is not a fun one. This, the wisdom that emanates from this, would be despised.
Maybe because somebody else didn't have what it took to go that
Or God didn't give it to them in any case. They didn't experience it here. They stopped here. And they despised the one and the wisdom from here. Huh. Why else would wisdom be despised? Why are they attractive?
Where, what?
Why are they attractive? Why are fools are attractive? They are. It says there the king is with the fools. This is the king. Why does he want to be with the fools? Because they're attractive. Why?
They're unintimidating and fun.
When you think of a fool, I think the word for fool might be jester, I think, in the Greek. And they were the court jesters. That was what the word used. Back in the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, that was what the word was used. The fool was the court jester. Entertainment. Now, if the fools are the lively, funny ones, what are the poor, wise people? The opposite of it? The not so funny, the quiet, just sit there ones? That's not fun. Get someone out there who's talking all the... What would you rather be around? A person who talks, or a person who just sits there? You can tell their mind might be going a mile a minute, but he just ain't saying nothing.
You get more from listening than talking.
You get more of what?
Whatever is being spoken.
Life. Hilarity, a lot of times. I find myself doing this sometimes. You know, if you ever start coming up with jokes, and this is coming from a person who didn't used to do any of that, and now I do more than I should of that. But, you know, if you start coming up with a funny way of poking at someone, you know how easy to come up with the next one and the next one and the next one? It's almost like a cascade effect. Meanwhile, the person that's being berated all the time doesn't like it so much, but everyone else is laughing. I think the wisdom of this poor man is not really attractive to a lot of people. And yet it is needful on those days when it's needful. But after its need has been accomplished, goodbye. Wisdom is despised. Here's a question. Would you still want wisdom if it was despised? All right, let's go on. 10-1. This is a rebuke to me. Dead flies cause the ointment of the apothecary to send forth a stinking savor. So does a little folly him that is in reputation for wisdom and honor. What does it say? It's actually the contrast we turned out here. What does it say?
A little folly's gonna dishonor, it's gonna make somebody not the wise. Look, not wise.
A person who's engaged in life in such a way that gives him much wisdom, it's out of character for him to play a fool. To be hilarious, to be funny, to be the court jester, to be less than serious. It's out of character. I know there's a struggle with that. And even in myself. With, is God against humor? And there's all these justifications that God is not in opposition to humor. How much humor is a part of our lives? A lot. We're talking about what we watch a lot of, entertainment. How much entertainment is actually humorous? Gobs of it. And some people will say if God made us and we are humorous, then obviously that's a part of who he is reflected in us. Okay. Here's my question. Anywhere in the Gospels, now we have 4 of them, many chapters, a lot. Is there any place in there that Jesus tells a joke? Jesus is less than pretty serious. About the closest thing we get is him eating with the disciples on the shoreline. But do you imagine Jesus cracking a joke on the shoreline? He could be. Give me some sort of biblical support for that. I wrestle with the balance of that. And this thing says there's really not a balance. The one doesn't come with the other. It's out of character. Wow. I want to find leeway, but it's hard for me to find it. And I always said about joking, and I know this, we'll be joking around until one person is having a bad day and they take it wrong. And then you realize how poor folly is. Because if you could do it over again, you'd undo the whole thing. Wow. This to me is serious. That's to me. This is serious. I mean, do you see wiggle room with this? I don't see wiggle room. Dead flies cause the ointment of the perfumer to stink. So does folly from the lips of a wise man. That was a real paraphrase. But yeah, it's like a wise man that tells a joke. Wow. All right. 10. This is an interesting one. If the iron be blunt, and he doesn't wet the edge, then must he put forth more strength, but wisdom is profitable to direct. How many of you ever split wood? If you've never split wood, you get up there with an axe, you get someone who split wood before, it's like, what if you're going to tell someone how to split a piece of wood, Steve, what would you tell them? Look for the cracks is one thing. That's not the only thing you look for, but also look for that. What else do you look for? There's a thing called knots in the wood, and that's where a limb comes out from it. It's a knot. And if you try to cut it through that knot, it doesn't cut very well. You got to cut it, and typically it's come out one side. You'll have a crack come this way, and this way. And you can hit this one and split it, hit this one to split it. But if you hit it through here, try to hit it through that, it doesn't come apart very much. And especially if your axe is dull, and you only have X amount of strength, someone with less strength can do a better job splitting than a person with more strength just by knowing how to direct the blade of the axe. That's what this is talking about.
So you get offended because wisdom's like a shortcut?
Wisdom, it's the easy cut. To live life wisely is the easiest path to success. And I don't mean success like, health, wealth, and prosperity. I mean success as making it through the struggles to the other side. Because we only have X amount of emotional energy. We only have X amount of physical energy. I'm not sure spiritual energy is suggested here, but it would be for other things as well. Yeah. Wisdom wisely directs our life to accomplish the tasks at hand. You ever see a person kicking against the goads constantly? When you have people who come and they're in need, I have opportunity to counsel them and I listen. That's the only way I can get to know people, because I don't read people very well. I listen to what they say. Sometimes they gather information from around. But almost every time, you know where we are today was because of the decisions we made yesterday. You know, our tomorrow will never be different unless we start making different decisions than we did yesterday. And that's what I tell them. I says, you know, you are where you are today because of the decisions of yesterday. I says, it doesn't have to stay that way, but it'll only be different if you choose different. I don't know if these people ever get it or not. Sometimes you see them years later in the same situation they were in. Maybe worse. Wisely directed. Wisely placed. Wisely executed. Helps with a better life. Yeah, I know a man, he's about my age. Man, brilliant. He's a brilliant man. He's able to turn a rusty penny into $100 bill. He's just the way that he is. But he couldn't stay off the drugs. Today he can't work for more than a few hours a day. He looks like about death warmed over. And he still barely has now anything to his name. Because he didn't wisely apply himself to life. He can't go back and undo that. He can't go back and undo that. That's why we talk about being young and dumb. We think we can bounce back from everything from now on. This is cautioning us to conduct ourselves wisely. You know, there's some things you don't have to experience in life. And we will look at other people like that sometimes and say, well, and start coming with excuses why they're having a better slice of life than you are. Maybe they're having a better slice of life than you are because they were wise about their life when they were where you are. Does that mean it's over? No. Make better choices for tomorrow. Make better choices for tomorrow. That's what this is talking about. Take the strength that you have and the knowledge that you have and apply it to life wisely. That's what this is saying. All right, let's go on. Time is, yeah, we're good. Time. 12:11. Ooh. This brings me to something, but listen to this. The words of the wise are like goads. Maybe this is one of the reasons why the words of the wise are despised. You know what a goat is? My dad used to haul cattle down to Arizona because the cattle in Minnesota didn't have the diseases the southern cattle have because it got so cold up there that disease couldn't have it. So you want a healthy cow, you got a cow from the north and they shipped them down. Well, he would come down once in a while with this other guy, and they'd have these things called a cattle prod. You know what a cattle prod is? Yeah. and you couldn't. If the cows fell down, they couldn't fall down. They had to stand up because the others would trample it. So if you saw one that was down, you goaded them with that prod. It would. Well, that man would chase my dad on occasion with that cattle prod. I don't think he. I hope he didn't actually goad my dad with it, but that would be what goading is taking that cattle prod and going, da-da-da-da-da-da. That's what it says wisdom is. How many of you would like to be goaded with a cattle prod or a taser?
It doesn't feel good. I shot myself with a cattle prod.
Maybe that's why wisdom is despised. Wisdom is like a goad. When you're getting instruction, say you're learning, I go back to the cabinet shop, get stuff. Go into the cabinet shop and you figure out how to do the cutout list. And say, Stephen, you're starting to do the cutout list. They says, wait a second, you got to start with the longest board and go with the shortest board. The widest board, go to the narrow board because you'll be more conservative with your wood. And you'll be making a cut that says, wait a second, Stephen, you got one here that's longer than that. Can you squeeze that into there? And I'm correcting you in that. It seems like, oh, okay, that's right. That's no problem. Why can't we do that with wisdom? I mean, we go someplace and we learn and we call it good, but when we're corrected, we call it bad. Why is that? I wonder if it's not touching deeper than just a cutout list. It's cutting to the spirit. where the issues of sin and rebellion are. It's bigger there. He says wisdom is like a goad. It's like a nail.
Turns you in the right direction.
Well, it's not talking about driving us in the right direction. It's talking about nails fastened by the masters of assemblies. It's being driven through a piece of wood into another wood to get it there. Yeah.
Mine says, well-driven nails given by one shepherd.
What does it say?
Given by one shepherd.
That's what you're saying?
Shepherd's capital.
That's what was yours say again?
What's yours, Miss Andy? King James?
New King James.
Okay. The words of the wise are like goads and like nails fastened by the masters of assemblies, which are given by one shepherd. Yeah, it says, but it's fastened by the masters of assemblies. Okay, and then you guys went to the next part, which are given by one shepherd. Okay, so it does say given by one shepherd. Okay, so I'm not sure what that part means. Of course, they're given by one shepherd. Capital S there would be Jesus Christ or some person of the Godhead reference, which would be Christ, the Anointed One, would be that, yes. So this would be a suggestion then in that this wisdom that we're talking about here is not separate from the shepherd. Right? One shepherd. Go ahead, Miss Andy.
I was thinking it said, they're like well-driven nails. The words of the scholars, if they're coming from God, they're going to be the right word.
Right words.
They're going to be
Mm-hmm.
like nails driven, because some people are not going to want to listen to them, but they're.
Would we agree that sometimes wisdom is just wonderful, right? It's good to hear, good to contemplate, good to wrap our minds around and stretch our minds on. But there's sometimes it's not.
Sometimes we don't want to hear them because of what they're doing.
This is what I want to bring up. This is such a huge thing to me right now, and I don't know how to teach people how to do this. I have to encourage us to try. Why? Why, when wisdom is recognized, we all agree wisdom is a good thing. But this tells us sometimes that which is wisdom. First of all, we're probably not identifying wisdom. We're calling it just someone else's opinion or judgmental, whatever it is, casting out for whatever reason we have. We don't like it, is a goad. Why?
This is not when you're growing up, when your parents and you think you're stupid, and they're trying to teach you, but you're not going to listen because you have your own mind. This is what I think.
Ooh! During that time, Miss Andy, and you're doing exactly what I think sometimes we have to do before we get to where it's more fuller in nature. We can see it in someone else. Miss Andy, did you go through that stage of rebellion where you thought your parents were stupid?
No.
You did? Okay.
I wasn't belligerent, and I wasn't the one to go out and do stuff, like one of my sisters would do, but there were times when I thought, they didn't, what they were saying wasn't smart sometimes,
Would it have been able for you then? Okay, wisdom was considered a goad at that particular time. Because your parents, certainly as you look back over, it says, no, that was pretty smart. Is it possible before advanced stage to stop yourself short, figure it out, and realize why you're thinking that? Because you've already given the answer. There's sometimes wisdom doesn't sound, it's not something we want to receive. We would like to say we're perfect every day of every year. We'd like to say that. But we're not. Sometimes things bother us. Why? Why do they bother you? And then, Miss Sandy, you talked about it, because it could be that you were young and you weren't stupid. And you had that desire to be independent and on your own, make life on your own. You could do that, and it wasn't going the way that your parents did because, they're not wise. Why do you think that? Miss Sandy, you brought it up. It's because of our rebellion inside us, but you got to be able to trace the dots there yourself or get someone to help you do that. Or you might be just kicking against the goad, like Paul did. Jesus showed up in that. Paul's kind of hard for you to kick against the goad, isn't it? I don't think Paul was realizing he was kicking against the goad until God brought it to his attention. You're kicking against the goads.
Because he thought he was doing the right thing.
He thought he was doing the right thing. Till God showed up and said, hey, kind of hard going in life, aren't you? I wonder if he wasn't wrestling with conscience issues. Maybe that's what that was talking about. God stopped him in his tracks, literally. Knocked him off his horse, literally. Got his attention at a deeper level. In fact, he got his attention on the surface level, didn't he? Took his eyesight away temporarily. You know what you do when you cut off your eyesight? What do you see then? Let me ask, if you were to fail to see with your eyeballs, would you stop seeing? No, not in the fullness of the words. Even if you don't learn Braille, Miss Annie, you're still seeing things, learning things, figuring things out, observing things, except it's by a different sense. It'd be with your ears and your mind. So God took his eyesight away to where he began seeing things differently. You know, we have different situations of life that we react to, and it's not just young people, it's all people. Tire goes flat, and we're throwing a wrench across the road. Why did you do that? Because my tire's flat. Okay? So you threw your wrench across the road because your tire was flat. No, I've just been having a hard time in life. Good, we got to a second point. Why are you having a hard time in life? Well, because my tire went flat, and I had to scrape ice off my car this morning, and I'm running late, and the road was muddy. Right? It rained the night before. I didn't get much sleep. Okay? So why are you upset? Because all these things... Why did all those things happen? Well, I wouldn't have been tired this morning if I didn't stay out so late last night. Why were you out so late last night? Reading your Bible? No. If I was reading my Bible, I probably would have been earlier. It had a better benefit of life. See, if we think through things by asking those additional questions, we find out what the real deeper issues are sometimes if God were to show us. Here's Solomon. I think he was looking at these things. Vanity is vanity, all is vanity. He was looking. But you know what? I wonder if he wasn't looking at other people more than he was looking at himself. If Solomon would have asked himself, this wisdom is supposed to be good stuff. Why is it so miserable to me? Solomon would have evaluated his relationship at that moment with God. If you're a chosen one of God, which I believe Solomon was, and you're experiencing a miserableness of life that just won't go away, you know what? God's trying to get your attention. You're kicking against the goads. A goad of wisdom. Okay, if I'm a chosen one of God, and I'm experiencing the miserableness of life, why? You know, Solomon wouldn't have to look outside his house to see why. God appeared to Solomon early on and told him, hey, if you go by my ways, he said, I'll bless you just like I blessed your dad, David, my servant David. Why aren't you experiencing that blessing right now? As he looked at his multitude of wives from all these different countries and having set up in all these different temples in and around the area. I wonder if God would have said, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one. Can God give you joy in the midst of misery? The answer is yes. Can God give you peace in the midst of a storm? Oh, yes, he can. but only if you're in the boat with Jesus. Am I in the boat with Jesus? And then you begin to entertain notions at that level with the help of God, and He will direct you. I hope I can find it. A psalm comes to mind right now. Psalm 16:11. Thou wilt show me the path. Psalm 16:11. Thou wilt show me the path of life. In thy presence is fullness of joy. At thy right hand there are pleasures forevermore. Who's writing this?
David.
Probably David. Great answer too, by the way. Probably David. Who is the one giving the pleasures of life here?
God.
Who is he giving it to? Trick question. Not just David. It's anyone who chooses to be on the path of God. Which is limited to the ones who might know where that is, which is limited to the elect, which we would include ourselves to be a part of. You will show me. Try it. Find yourself reacting to something. Ask yourself if it's a godly reaction. After you get through all the reasons and justifications, realize it's not. First step. Then ask yourself why you responded that way. And think. And you'll have answers. You may come up with quick answers. But then stop and think, is that really as deep as this goes? Is that from where all this is coming from? And think if there's not something deeper at issue. If Solomon would have done that, I think Ecclesiastes ends on a pretty positive note, but it's still real dark in the midst of it all. It's kind of like throw up your hands. Okay, I know the whole duty of man is this. I think if Solomon would have been digging in his own life and sought for the wisdom that really comes from God, he might have stopped short of some of this other tomfoolery he did and had a greater end. I say that with fact because Solomon's end wasn't real good. He chased off his general because God said he was going to split the kingdom because of his antics. That general was Jeroboam. Remember the one who showed up when Rehoboam took over? He was there back from Egypt. He was in Egypt because Solomon wasn't going to go there. And Jeroboam was there, waiting to see what Rehoboam was going to do. Because remember, God showed up to Jeroboam and said, hey, I'll make the same blessed promise to you as I did David. But here is Solomon. If he would have asked himself, why are you chasing off Jeroboam? Well, because the prophet came by and told me that he's going to split the kingdom out of my hand and give it to someone, and I think that's going to be him. That prophet, I don't think, ever come out and said it was Jeroboam, but Solomon, a smart man, knew that was probably who was going to. So here's Solomon looking at his own life. Why am I chasing off this general? Well, why did the general leave? Well, he kind of feared for his life. Yeah? He got tried to usurp the kingdom out of my hand. Okay, Solomon. Remember, it was the prophet that told you, not Jeroboam. Oh, yeah. And why did the prophet tell you that? Yeah, I remember what he said. What does that mean, Solomon? Well, maybe it has to do with all the idols and all the growth that I got going on. Wow. I'm sorry, God. You think God might have said, hey, we're going to hold short on this for a few generations? Yeah. You know why God didn't split the kingdom in two during Solomon's reign?
David.
Because of David, not because of him. Boy, howdy. God, I'm sorry. Right? Solomon could have stopped right there and says, God, I'm sorry. You've promised so much to me and I have not returned the favor. And Solomon's smarter than me. I'm sorry, God. You think God would have forgiven him? Oh, I believe he would have. We see numerous examples of God saying, even Ahab, he was a bad king. God postponed it on him shortly. We can still do that today. I mean, there's a lot of things that tests us on that. Your life is a test. Life in one way is a test. Who's in charge of the test? Oh, God is. It doesn't matter whether we're raising a family, at the workplace, dealing with other individuals. This can find us better. It's like the axe on that piece of wood with knots in it and it's dull. You can direct that thing wisely and have a greater success in life than if we'll just whacking away at, getting madder and madder and madder and more mad and more mad. Until you break the handle and then you're more mad yet. Why did I break the handle? A stupid piece of wood wouldn't split. Well, wait a second. Maybe because you didn't direct that thing well. Maybe you can't see it now, but there were cracks in that piece of wood that you could have followed and studied like a road map and realized if you hit it from here, it would have split better. And if you didn't do that, you could turn that thing upside down and see a different set of cracks going a different set of ways and try that way. And then you'd realize that sometimes going right through the middle of that knot is the way to split that piece of wood. Not every time, but sometimes. And it did it that time. But you won't know now because you're sitting there with an axe with a broken handle. See, we can go through life with a broken handled axe. Or we can be smarter about it. And I believe what I saw in the end of that is the thing that it's part of me looking at people. Trying to help them see themselves and find victory in the midst of it all. With what God gives me, with what God gives them. So that not only I can, but they can too. Live a life better directed. Wisdom is a goad sometimes. When it is, ask ourselves, why do I feel it's a goad? It'll help us discover why. Usually it needs to be repented of. And once we do, God forgives us and gives us a new lease on life. So anyway, that's what I got for tonight.